So in this learning objective, we're going to learn a new definition of sine and cosine. All right, so in our previous learning objectives in the previous unit, we learned the definition of sine and cosine as we had this right triangle. We had some angle A, and sine was so as we would take the opposite side and divide it by the hypotenuse. And the sine of this angle A was whatever that opposite side is divided by however long the hypotenuse was. So we call them trig ratios because they're the ratios of the sides of a right triangle. However, not every angle that we have can be put into a right triangle. Triangles have a limitation of they can only go up to 180 degrees. So we're talking about bigger angles in quadrant 3 or something like that. All right, this definition of sine and cosine doesn't work anymore. So we're going to figure out a new definition for sine and cosine. And the new definition is going to look like this. So we're going to start off with our angle in standard position. And so that's our first side on the positive x-axis. We rotate our terminal side counterclockwise. And already this angle I drew would not be possible in a right triangle because the angle is bigger than 90 degrees. All right, but say I had this angle. I want to figure out its sine and cosine. All right, they call this angle T. All right, what I'm going to do is similar to when we defined radians, we're going to put a unit circle. Again, unit circle just means its radius 1. Making radius 1 just makes all the numbers nicer. All right, so we get this unit circle around our angle. And if we look at our terminal side, as it goes from the center to the outside, it's going to cross my unit circle in 1 point. And that's going to be some point x, y. All right, so we have our angle inside of a unit circle, and the terminal side hits the unit circle in exactly 1 point. All right, this green dot here. And what we're going to say is whatever the x value is, we're going to call the cosine of the angle. Whatever the y value is, we're going to call the sine of the angle. All right, so this new definition is what we're going to use for the rest of the unit. But you have to remember cosine is x values on the unit circle. Sine is y values. And it's a little frustrating because normally we say when we're talking about that, we say sine and cosine. All right, but cosine is actually the one that comes first. Cosine is the x value. Sine is the y value. All right, so is this actually the same as our old definition? Well, let's kind of look at what we could do. So let's look at an actual angle that could be in a right triangle. Let's say we had our angle here. All right, so this is our angle T. We have our unit circle. And we know sine and cosine is going to be this point there. All right, well, if I want to relate this to my previous definition for sine and cosine, I have to make a right triangle. And it's not obvious where there's going to be a triangle in this situation, but what I'm going to do is take this point and draw a line straight down. And now you can see, I'll actually highlight it, this triangle here. All right, so this triangle here is a right triangle. And we can label the sides of the triangle. So the first thing is the height of this triangle is from the bottom here up to the top. That's just the same as the height of your point. So this is actually just whatever y is. The width of this triangle is from the center to the right. That's just the same as whatever your x value is. And the hypotenuse is from the center of your circle to the edge of your circle. If you ever go from the center of your circle to the edge, that's the radius of your circle. And this is a unit circle, so the radius is 1. All right, so knowing this point, I can make this right triangle. And I can say the sine of this angle T using SOHCAHTOA as the opposite side, which opposite from T is going to be y, over the hypotenuse, which is 1. And you see sine actually is just the y value. All right, cosine is adjacent, which is x, over the hypotenuse 1. And you can see cosine is actually just the x value. So this definition for an angle in the first quadrant corresponds exactly with our ratios that we were doing before. By forcing it to be a unit circle, this 1 causes the kind of fraction part to go away, and we just get y and x. So even though it's a new definition, it's actually still related to what we were doing in our previous unit. All right, so we're going to figure out more complex ways to do this in the future, but today, or in this learning objective, we're just going to look at the basic definition. So if I want to find sine of an angle, I look at where the terminal side, which is this red line here, hits the unit circle, and I take the y value of that point. So in this case, sine is just 0.761. Cosine, same thing. My angle hits unit circle, but I take the x value, 0.649. All right, so that's all you have to do for this new definition of sine and cosine. Figure out where that angle hits the unit circle. X is cosine. Oh, I actually made a mistake. This is negative, right, because there's a negative sign there. And the sine is the y value. All right, so find sine and cosine for this angle. All right, so sine of t. My angle hits the unit circle, and I take the y value. In this case, I remember that there's a negative value, and that is my sine. Cosine of t. Same angle, same point of the unit circle, except for in this case, I take the x value. All right, so that's all you have to do for sine and cosine. If you know where that angle hits the unit circle, x is cosine, y is sine. And sometimes this is actually what we'll be focusing on for the rest of the unit. You'll get nicer values that aren't decimals. All right, so for this one, sine of my angle is going to be that y value, the square root of 3 over 2. And cosine is going to be 1/2. Right? Nothing changes based on the fact that they're not written as decimals. So figure out where that angle hits the unit circle. X is cosine, y is sine. All right, so here's one for you to try on your own. All right, what is sine and cosine of this angle t? And what you should get is that your sine is the y value 0, and your cosine is the x value 1. All right, so for this learning objective, we're going to do a skill check. All right, the skill check is going to be 2 angles that you're given, and you have to find the sine and cosine of both. So just remember, sine is the y value of that point, cosine is the x value of the point. All right, so it's really important going forward that you have that memorized.